Morning, everybody. I'm super excited to have Eric Brooker on my call today. Eric, welcome to our podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here today.
I've been talking to you for a bit, and you've done some amazing stuff. We're talking about Big Leaf, being a customer of that. You work there. You have an amazing background in the channel. So I'm super excited to looking forward to where this entire ecosystem space is going. So maybe before we get going, it'll be great if you would please take a minute and introduce yourself.
Yeah, no, again, thank you for the opportunity. I'm excited to be here. I've got a couple of different things that I'm involved in. As I've mentioned to you before, I'm an author and a keynote speaker, generally talking about things like leadership, culture, and relationship capital. But the day job, if you will, the day job is I run an organization that is focused on helping the supplier community in the channel ecosystem ultimately drive more revenue and relevance. By trade, I started as a direct sales guy. I give up golly about 25 years ago, moved into sales management, ended up getting in on the indirect or the channel side, ran channel programs, ran channel marketing, and again with a really great business partner, run a firm called the Channel Advisors that focuses on helping the suppliers.
Brilliant. So what does Channel Advisor do? What do you guys do?
Yeah, it's a great question. So when we look at the ecosystem of the channel as we know it today, I'll talk about the TSD or the master agent channel. They've gotten a lot of attention. The TSDs have gotten a lot of attention through private equity, through venture capital, and through Wall Street money and investments. The trusted advisors, the agents, the MSPs have gotten gobbled up at such a clip that they're also getting the attention. They've been forced to evolve. But suppliers are almost exclusively doing the same thing that was winning them business 20 years ago. And we refer to where we are now as Channel 2.0. The channel's changed. We have to evolve. So we have a pretty robust set of methodologies that refine a supplier's go to market strategy and give them the tools and capacity to do things like retain employees longer because you're capturing more data in a CRM. Speaking of CRM, we have an entire CRM practice around building your CRM for the channel so you're capturing the right data so you can track things like return on investment on MDF dollars and things like that all the way all the way to a master class that we host that is online, and we even do some recruiting in the channel space as well.
That is awesome. So I know we have spent quite a bit of time in the telco space. And, whether 20 years ago or 30 years ago, for sure, telco used to be analog and then switched over to digital. And so the divide that used to exist, tech versus telco, no longer does. Having said that, a telco tends to be a little bit still unique compared to the mainstream hardware, software, tech channel. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about the evolution of telco as you have seen it from analog to digital to convergence with mainstream hardware, software space and where it's going.
So it's interesting that you use the word convergence because I talk about the convergence of other channels into the TSD or telco channel. And all I mean by that is we in the telco side used to win business like local phone service, long distance, internet. And then we started selling things like UCAS, VoIP, hosted telephony. But alongside of us was a managed service provider, someone we didn't interact with. They won their own set of business, things like data center, things like cybersecurity. And what's happening now is that convergence that you talked about. So the agent, the advisor needs to come in and offer a broader breadth of solutions because in that convergence, what we're seeing is either the MSP or the telco agent are ultimately going to win all of the business for that end user because the end user doesn't see value in working with multiple suppliers if they can hammer and nail it down all the way to one trusted advisor, one party that they go to for all of their technology needs. We're also seeing a massive influx of suppliers. When I started in the channel, there were only 40 or 50 suppliers. So for me to get my share, or as my friend Cap would say, my unfair share of business, it wasn't very hard. There were 40 suppliers. There were only two that did what I did. And it was easy in a pond of 10 to 12,000 companies that could sell our product. It was easy to hit your number. It was easier to hit your goals and objectives. There are those same 10 to 12,000 agents or advisors out there, but the amount of suppliers is so much higher. There's six, seven, 800 suppliers, and the channel advisors, our approach, our data suggests in just the next 2 years, there's going to be roughly 15 to 1600 suppliers in total. So we really have to start setting ourselves apart. We have to differentiate, and we have to empower the advisors, the sellers, the MSPs to know when to bring us in and where we as a supplier community truly add value.
Someone great said that history doesn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme. So maybe if we, before we go forward, we kind of double clicked. And, I kind of grew up in New Jersey, the home of the Big Blue Bell. And remember, I know I'm going to date myself saying that I remember, my bell getting split up and little baby bells being formed. So at that time, the ecosystem in the telco area, we had these ILEC, CLEC, multiple XLECs kind of entities. And then triple play started to happen, voice video data convergence that you're saying, right? The cable guys were coming in, satellites coming in. So telco started to evolve. So walk us through maybe in three phases, 30 years ago, 10 or 15 years ago, now, and 10 years forward in those segments. The convergence, the meaning of it has rapidly changed in almost at a decade level, right? And now there's AI. So we'll get to that in the last bit. But if you dial back a little bit, to sort of the big bell to ma bell and baby bells, and then how the ecosystem changed. That may be a great context for some of our younger audience that were wondering what was a ma bell.
Well, yeah. So you said you aged yourself. I don't go back quite as far, but I've been in this nearly 25 years. So in 1996, we had the Telecom Act of 1996, which is what you're referring to. Prior to that, AT&T was the big 800-pound gorilla. They were a monopoly. There was no one else to buy from. And then we saw some regional divide, which was ultimately AT&T selling off assets so other parties could come to life. And if memory serves, at that point, there were three RBOCs, regional bell operating carriers. And then in that Telecom Act of 96, divestiture happened. So basically, Eric, with a couple of $1 million, could negotiate rates from what then was AT&T, Southwestern Bell, companies like US West, now Lumen, and I could buy fiber and copper assets. I could lease fiber and copper assets and resell them. That's about the time I got into the business. So I think it was Thanksgiving dinner of either 1999 or 2000, I met my very first boss at Thanksgiving dinner, and I was making very little money. My wife was pregnant. We were about to have our first child. I needed a real job, and he offered me a slight increase from what I was making. I started with a company called Access Long Distance out of Salt Lake City, Utah. All we sold, all we sold was long distance. And I sold it as a direct rep. There was no channel 25 years ago. And believe it or not, when I got there 2 weeks later, my first paycheck came from a company, now Windstream, came from a company called McLeod USA. So mergers and acquisitions in the late 90s, early 2000s were happening. And within 6 months, I had local phone service. We started to sell internet, which was, it was just wild that you could sell. And the sales motion was pretty easy. I just had to walk in and say, "Hi, my name's Eric Brooker. I'm with a company called McLeod USA. We are an alternative to US West." That was the elevator pitch. And the response was, I didn't know there was an option. I didn't know I could leave US West. Where do I sign? In those early days, there was a 4 or 5 year stretch where closing business was easy. But these carriers like McLeod, now we know Lumen and AT&T, Verizon, Windstream, AirSpring, CommandLink, they all want to capture as much of the business as possible, because back in the day when I sold my first long distance deal, if someone came in cheaper, it was easy to leave. But when you start adding products, you start to make that deal stickier. And the stickier you could make that deal up until about 2005, maybe 2008, the longer the contract, the stickier it was, the less likely they were to leave, they being customers. I had a CEO of a multi-billion dollar company tell me one day, I worked for him, I won't say his name, we all suck. Our job is to suck the least. That was the thesis in '05. But '05 to '08, we started to see a shift. Other products, like you talked about, unified communications as a service, voice over IP, as many of us know it, that entered the market. It's taken years for the adoption of UCaaS. But as UCaaS came in, contact center as an option came into the market. Now, cybersecurity, SD-WAN, you mentioned Big Leaf, all these other companies came in. Some of them were niche, some of them are what I like to refer to as aggregators. But we're at a point now in, what are we, almost 2025, the value that we add has to be, our elevator pitch has to be on point. Our website has to be clear and crisp with a compelling thesis as to what we do and the value that we bring. Buyers are younger, they're buying faster, they're making very strong investments in technology because we have not needed technology the way in which we need it today ever before. AI is another one. I've got a whole thesis on AI and where that fits into the channel that I'd love to share if we get there.
Awesome. So let's take sort of maybe yesterday, maybe not that many, decades ago, when the convergence of voice, video, data kind of happened. We saw like proliferation of technologies like Zoom and others that rode on the backbone of that, infrastructure. Because without that, Zoom wouldn't happen. And then COVID happened. A lot of the work went remote. Then streaming happened. So bundling something means very different today than bundling meant 10 years ago, 20 years ago. So if I'm a salesperson in the telco space selling solutions to business, right? What does my bundle look like today?
Oh, it has to come. I think that the technology, now, I don't want to say is irrelevant, but the technology has to be advantageous to the end user. There were times in the early days of my career, I don't know that I added a ton of value, but I saved them money. There are an estimated 150 voice over IP companies in the channel today. I haven't heard this statistic in a long time, but I think there's something like 8,000 voice over IP companies in the US. Unless you add value, I'm not going to switch. But the value chain is changing on a daily basis. So if I'm buying local, long distance, and internet 20 years ago, all I needed was to save money. When I'm buying voice over IP or a UCaaS platform today, I need to know that there's a large language model or AI in the background, not just so I can say AI, but I want it to be specific to the industry, to the vertical that I serve. I'm a financial institution. Are you HIPAA compliant? Are you PCI compliant? Do you provide voice recordings? Can you redact people giving credit card numbers? So the bundles are more robust. They're far more technologically advanced, but they're driven by solutions. I wouldn't have made it today 20 years ago. And all I mean by that is I sold on price because that's what the buyer wanted. You can't sell on price. You can't even sell on a brand. You and I are old enough to remember the days of, and insert your name here. Nobody ever got fired for choosing IBM. I think that was the original. It was Lumen, it was AT&T, it was Verizon. There's very, very little of that anymore. There is still some, but when I walk into an office and I take a true consultative approach and I add value, not as a salesperson, but as a thought leader in the space that happens to have solutions, your best bet is to say, I don't have the right solution. Let me introduce you to someone that does. Then it does squeezing them into a product that's not a fit. The value chain is much greater today than it's ever been.
So let's build on that customer value. So if we maybe double click based on segments, SMB, mid market, and enterprise, is it possible? Like if I'm a connectivity provider at a core, and then my value wraps around that, that superpower that I provide connections for some sort. What does that bundle look like? What is SMB purchasing from a change perspective, right? Because you said price is not a switch, brand is not a switch. So it's really the bundle is the switch. What does the bundle look like in SMB versus mid market and enterprise? And where do you see the greatest opportunity for change?
The value chain in the SMB all the way up to the enterprise is in large part buying the same products, but in the enterprise, everything comes custom. They have the resources financially and probably from a human capital perspective to extend resources to do things that the SMB doesn't. But in the SMB, they're still buying UCaaS and contact center, BPO, outsourced call center. They're buying SD-WAN because the cost of not transacting, back to your point about COVID and Zoom and everything rides on the internet. As a small business owner, I run a small business. I've got two internet connections and an SD-WAN device at my house because the cost of me not being on a Zoom call for an hour is much greater than the bill I get for a second internet connection and an SD-WAN device every month. The disadvantage that I have in the SMB space, I don't have a lot of opportunity to customize, but I still need cybersecurity. I still need PCI compliancy. I still need SD-WAN. In fact, I still need AI. I just need AI differently than the large enterprise. The large enterprise still has people sitting at the front desk answering phones. The doctor's office still has someone sitting at the front desk answering phones. I don't have that. I need a chat bot on my website that can take and answer live feeds from people that I'm interacting with and feed me the qualified stuff, feed my business partner the qualified stuff. We're all trying to do more with less. We're in a down economy right now. And yet people are still investing in technology, and they're investing in the SMB all the way up to the enterprise because the value of these offerings is much greater. Where a small business might buy a product I interacted with a couple of months ago called Hey Libby, which is a chatbot. It's a very intelligent chatbot. I, as a small business owner, can teach it all that I need. In the enterprise, I'm building my own LLM and I'm teaching it everything. And it's probably going to do far more than the one little Hey Libby chatbot application is going to do. But I think the technology chain itself is pretty similar these days, believe it or not.
Makes a lot of sense. So let's go back to one point of contention that connectivity brought into our offices and home, which is security.
Yeah.
When nodes were not connected, the only intruders we worried about are the burglars breaking in. And the moment the nodes were connected, we didn't know who were in our home, who were in our laptop, in our data, in our storage. And SMB suffered the most. Enterprise, as you said, they buy best of breed, they lock it down. So where do you see the opportunity in SMB and mid-market if I'm a connectivity provider from a cybersecurity perspective, especially now the nations are involved, hacking each other? Is that a big play, or is it now kind of shifted towards more the security provider? It's unbundled from the connectivity. How do you see that happening right now?
So I see cybersecurity as a separate stack. I see the firms, the supplier community that I see thus far the most successful by my definition are the ones that are doing cybersecurity as a standalone. So they're not the traditional aggregators, the AirSprings, the Command Links. I think they do a good job, but I think these standalone firms are able to extend further resources. The reality is we all came home Most of us in the employee chain didn't think much of it. I had my laptop, I had internet, I was going to work from home. But from an IT perspective and a senior leadership perspective, you're accessing all of our data. When I work, General Mills is not too far from my home, corporate office for General Mills. When I work at General Mills, I'm on their local area network. They built that out in a secure fashion to where I can still surf Facebook. I can still go on to Wells Fargo and pay bills. I can still do all of those things, but they're protecting their data, their content. But when I'm at home, my home internet is far more susceptible, meaning someone could get on my network and all of a sudden has access to the information on my computer. If I work at 3M or General Mills or corporate Best Buy and I'm working from home, some, if not all of that data is accessible all of a sudden. So cybersecurity is more important now than ever. And we are in an environment where we have to, I'm going to step out of camera for just a second. I've got a device here from my friends at Infinite Wireless. It's a secure internet connection. I take this everywhere that I go. I take this to the coffee shop. I take it to the airport. And it's for no other reason that I want to protect my data. But most employees are in the coffee shop using Wi-Fi, at the airport, in a hotel, running on unsecured networks. The need for cybersecurity is greater now, not just for that reason, but for the reason that you brought up. Cybersecurity, I hope, is at its peak. Unfortunately, I doubt it. Number one. Number two, the risk of that data getting out, whether it be a hack or ransomware or stealing intellectual property, can and has destroyed businesses. The SMB cannot afford to get $100,000 ransomware attack. They can't, which is where cybersecurity and cybersecurity protection really comes in.
What I'm hearing though from you is that that solution that SMB is buying around security is coming from a different provider and not the connectivity provider. Because during the talk of convergence 5 or 7 or 10 years ago, there was an assumption that that was a natural convergence point, that your connectivity provider in SMB will provide some sort of a security suite, right? And maybe what I'm hearing from you is that because of the complexity of it, that convergence didn't necessarily happen because the specialization need is so high. They're a separate group of people providing.
And where they're not a separate supplier, I think of the AirSprings, the Command Links, and some of the other aggregators. They're building their own divisions of their aggregation service to bring in cybersecurity experts. So I still think the aggregators are winning business in that space, but they're doing it, dare I say, they're almost building a separate business unit to support that because the complexity of cybersecurity is much higher. I look at a Coro, I don't know the exact number. They used to sell one solution and it was sort of all encompassing of cybersecurity. What they realized is businesses want different things. And so they unbundled their product into what I think is 11 or 13 different products. And I think, I don't know this for a fact, I think they're seeing more people bundle it all back up now that they have the option to unbundle it, saying, well, wait a minute, I need that too. Because again, the risk, if the internet goes down, the internet goes down. Everybody go home and work for the day. You missed an hour of productivity. If there's a ransomware or some other cybersecurity breach, the cost is too great.
I'm going to come back to this bundle. I guess the new word is co-sell, but let's go back and double click on some of the nuisances we got when we all got connected. Other than viruses, one of the major nuisance was spam, right? And I worked in a security company about 20 years ago. We were trying to solve it at the endpoint level or at a gateway level. We had very little participation from the ISPs. And where the technology is today, ISPs play a much bigger role, while the gateway and endpoint still play a role in cleaning it up. But because of IP reputation and other technologies, the architecture has changed substantially how we address issues like spam, right? So now, kind of fast forward, I will come back to the co-sell discussion. when you think about fake AI, fake videos, fake voicemails, fake spams, texts, that are proliferating because of AI, before we talk about the good use of AI, can you share a little bit about where the infrastructure provider are in their play, helping companies to prevent against the new nuisances of fake AI based content, data, video, everything else?
So I was just at an event in Nashville that ScanSource and Intelisys hosted, and the new president, a guy by the name of Ken Mills, got on stage and was talking, and he referenced 5 years ago, we used to get texts from our senior leaders, and the text was, "Hey, this is Eric Brooker. I'm texting you from my personal cell phone. I'm at an event. I need $1,000 in Target or iTunes or Apple gift cards." And people fell for that 5 or 10 years ago. It's still happening. Ken addressed that it's still happening. I'm not sure why people fall for it anymore. But in the world of AI and in the world of the AI, not just the AI generated voice, but the AI generated voice that now sounds or looks just like your boss, just like the CEO. It's becoming increasingly difficult to be able to identify what is AI and what is not. I think as end users, as consumers, we have an obligation to carefully discern how we interact with people. If I get a text from someone I don't know, "Hey, Eric, I hope all is well." A year ago, I would respond, "Hey, new phone," or for whatever reason, "I don't have your phone number in here." And then I would start to recognize over the course of time, "Hey, it's Susie. It's been a really long time. Hey, Susie, from where?" And then I realized it was spam. We're building laws around this. And while I say we're building laws around this, we just finished a presidential election where I got ad nauseum, despite having very strong regulations around cellular texting, business texting, and the associated fines per text, which I think are like $10,000 per person. I got an unprecedented number of text messages. AI is starting to trend in that way. I believe the suppliers, I don't think they've figured it out because AI, ChatGPT, OpenAI, all these LLMs, they've all been around a long time, but they came to market so quickly. I think we're going to start to create laws and build practices, but recognize that despite what the suppliers do to prevent us from receiving them, we still, as individuals, have to discern well because stuff's going to get through. Spam, if you will, is going to get through.
Yeah, because 5 years ago, if I called into bank or any financial institution, right, to check my account status on any form or shape, the greatest thing was voice print. That
Yes.
before that was you punch in your password or whatever, the PIN number or social security number, last 4 digit. Then he moved into, can we record your voice as a voice print? Now, as we get in, do you see there are technology companies in the startup space trying to address that in a multimodal solution? Because just voice is not good enough. You need now face and other touch or some other from your devices, so that there are three or four other inputs that would be harder to fake, or that hasn't happened yet.
So I had a project I was working on with a fellow from India, and it came time for me to pay him, and PayPal or Venmo seemed like the most effective way for me to pay him. And he sent me a link to something called Payoneer, which is the Indian version of some of these US based applications. The link itself was terrifying. It was professional, it was well built, it looked like Venmo or Apple Pay or any of these. I went to the website, I did some Google reviews. I then sent the link to Payoneer directly, confirming that it was in fact a real Payoneer link and that I could pay this guy with no worries. There are so many things going on right now. I believe that the most successful suppliers in the community are going to be the ones, we'll go back to solutions based selling, that are selling solutions, not savings, even in a down economy, that are selling solutions, not a quick fix. People are willing to play the long game now. I met a supplier at the Scan Source event this week that I believe is the answer to some of the problems that we're starting to see, some of the problems that you addressed. I don't know that anybody has solved for it at the pace technology is moving. I mean, now we've got I can't get into a personal social media account without multi-factor authentication, my bank account. So I think we're starting to shift away from the voice confirmation and move back to some of the more analog ways of confirming a person. But I think we're right around the corner. I just don't know what it is yet.
Makes sense. So going back to solution selling, we talked about bundles before. New buzzword is co-sell or co-selling or co-marketing. It's kind of the same thing, but in a little different way. What's your take on marketplaces? How are the telcos and telco ISP providers or ASP providers today playing around in marketplaces? There's a lot of buzz about the hyperscaler. What's the intersection between telcos and hyperscalers?
Amazon's got a marketplace, which I think drives companies like AppDirect to get a marketplace. ScanSource announced a marketplace called Channel Exchange. I think it's an interesting thesis, and I suspect the marketplace will have a place in the long run. The average buyer today is under 35 years old in the IT space. IT leaders, they're not as old as you and I are. They're coming in, they're doing a lot of their research online. I'm not yet convinced they're buying technical applications online. I think they're buying some of the more transactional things. We moved into this house 5 years ago. I bought CenturyLink and Comcast circuits online. Everything was delivered super easy. I'd buy a voice over IP service online if I was in the need for that. Some of the more complex products, I think we still want to talk to people to make sure that it's what I'm looking for, to make sure that I can use an API integration to tie it to my CRM or some of those more complex things. Marketplaces are not going anywhere. There is a billions of dollars being invested in the marketplace world. Someone's going to win. Had you looked at me 25, 30 years ago and said, hey, this internet thing that's on its way up, Eric, you're going to buy everything on the internet. Had you told me that 30 years ago that shopping malls and shopping centers were going to start to be a thing of the past, I would have laughed at you. You would have laughed at me. That was crazy talk. So to think that the marketplace doesn't have a home is, I think, foolish at this point. I'm still, as someone in his mid 40s, not a 35-year-old or younger buyer, I still think these more technology intensive products still need that face to face. I still think they need and want an advisor to give them that warm fuzzy. They still want to feel the tangible in the purchase of technology.
So when I build on that, what I'm hearing from you is that solutions that are transactional, they're possibly well positioned in marketplaces, but solutions or products that are bundled together, more complex, you need to think about integration and security and overall solution flow. They require more complex conversation, and they may find it out from the marketplace, but not necessarily buying from there. So let's go to the other side of the spectrum from a provider perspective. I'm a sales rep, and the life that you're describing is a pretty challenging life. It's not that life that Eric had from 20 years ago, walking in and selling connectivity
Yeah.
just based on price, right? So, what is the life of a sales rep looks like? Their core solution is connectivity, and they're wrapping in French fries, milkshakes, whole bunch of stuff around that. But their proliferation of those solutions, how do they learn? How do they train themselves? How do they survive in that, 1,000 SKU catalog world?
So we built if you're familiar with Masterclass, we have a Masterclass program that we have built, an entire educational university all around building things to answer these questions. Most of the content in there is free, but it starts with a deep rooted methodology. and understanding that it's not about, for me, it was going door to door in a high rise building, 1850 North Central. I'd go up to the 21st floor and I'd work my way down to the first floor, hope I didn't get kicked out, pick up a bunch of business cards, and start making phone calls the next day. It doesn't really work that way anymore. I'm a business owner. You're a business leader. We work from home. I'm not going to door in a residential community hoping to find the CEO, CIO, or CTO. So LinkedIn is a huge platform that needs to be used. Partner relationship managers, PRMs, are a resource for the partner community to understand the value that you as a supplier bring. That methodology of understanding that the sales process, for me, that started with the end user now starts with identifying where the partners are. And there's a whole second sales process now there's the partner sales process and the end user sales process. We have a methodology around how to build a CRM, what those sales processes need to look like, what sales leadership, sales leaders and marketers are responsible for doing, how to leverage LinkedIn as a platform. But really, the most simple answer to your question is have a compelling elevator pitch. When I tell you when you say, Eric, what is it that you do? And I say, at a supplier rich event, I say, I help suppliers drive revenue and relevance through the TSD and distribution channels. You have a question. What does that mean? When I sell multiple products, when I'm an aggregator, if I just said to you, "Hey, we're recruiters and consultants in the tech space," okay, got it. Thank you. That's not compelling. When you tell me that you're an aggregator or that you sell UCaaS or VoIP or contact center or BPO, that's the product that you sell. What's the value that you bring to the end user? How do you make the partner look like the hero to the end user? If you refine that elevator pitch, you're going to start having conversations that we all want to have. It's people leaning in saying, "What do you mean? Tell me more." Is that a fit in the SMB? I've got a client right now. Start using verticals. Hey, I've got a friend in Phoenix that owns a telecom agency. I know that if I say, "Hey, this is what I do," he's going to start asking me a bunch of questions to get to the product. But somewhere in there, I've told him that we work specifically in healthcare, hospitality, and finance. And I didn't just make that up. I know our customer base and I've done research on his website. He has healthcare, hospitality, and finance customers. So as I'm rattling off healthcare, hospitality, and finance, he's thinking of his clients. I'm adding value in the process that he didn't know. It's like the iPhone. We didn't know we needed an iPhone when the iPhone came out. Steve Jobs introduced us to the technology, and there's hundreds of millions of them across the globe. We couldn't live without them. That's got to be our elevator pitch. And we've got to follow a refined process, because knocking doors by itself and making phone calls, it doesn't work anymore by itself.
So in this new world, and if we kind of split it into supply, demand, or consumption and provider kind of a model, a consumer and provider model, how do you see AI getting stacked on the solution bundle? And how do you see AI getting stacked on the provider side? Like, how are the reps using it to learn better, provide better bundles together? Because they have a large catalog. And then what is in the product from an AI perspective that they're selling?
So, as an end user, as a salesperson, I use AI regularly. As an example, if you're my target client or target partner, there's tools out there, AI tools, where I can drop your website in and say, this firm is an ideal client for me or an ideal partner for me. Can you find other similarly minded companies in this geographic region, my territory? And it's going to give me a large swath of competitors. So I can start prospecting. I can connect with them on LinkedIn. I can pick up the phone and call them. I can go on their website and do my research. But man alive, AI from a salesperson perspective, there's AI platforms where I can compose an email at the bottom of my composition in the AI platform. I drop your LinkedIn profile in, and it rewrites the email to speak to your disk profile. So the email that I have composed is rewritten in a way that resonates with you more than just me throwing out some canned crap email. The tools are out there, and it's those of us that adopt the tools now that are going to be most successful in the long run. On the AI, had you asked me, it was November of last year where I really embraced AI. Had you told me AI is not going to be a product in these channels, I would have laughed at you. That's crazy. AI is going to be everywhere. What we're finding is AI is a product in the channel, but not many AI standalone companies are coming in as a supplier saying, this is what we do. We do artificial intelligence. We build large language models. What they're doing is they're stacking this technology on top of UCAS, on top of contact center, on top of BPO, on top of cybersecurity. So they're becoming HubSpot. Salesforce have AI platforms built into their ecosystems now. So if I'm building a marketing sequence, I'm now not just doing it on my own, I'm doing it with AI. I'm finding competitors already in my CRM because of AI. So if I had to play the long game here, I think I would bet that AI has a home. It's not going anywhere. It's here to stay. It's going to be here for a while. It's going to get better. It's going to hallucinate less. But from a product perspective, I don't think we're going to see a lot of AI as a standalone product. I think we're going to see it embedded in other technologies, which is going to be the expectation going forward.
That's a great summary. I think we're kind of seeing the same thing. AI is going from being a tag on, like the way Microsoft introduced Copilot, to
Yes.
more AI enabled applications that are leveraging these models in a more effective way, to going to more AI native architectures. So we completely see that way. So, Eric, one other thing I've been always curious about your background, that you have gone, not only personally gone through an enormous amount of change and grown as a leader, but also you have helped many companies to grow leaders and become leaders. And I know it's a very favorite topic of yours also, when you talk about leadership. And in this moment of change, that is possibly the most fundamental trait we all need to reflect on, that how do we adapt without freaking out? How do we reflect without forgetting? And how do we sort of envision the future where it's not dark and gloomy, that all the jobs are going to go away, and we will be living under whatever government subsidized whatnot. On the other hand, there's a lot more opportunities coming. Hopefully it'll be a lot more equal for more people. So how do you see leadership play in this role at an organizational level, or even at an individual level, and what role are you playing?
It's a really great question. I think for me as a leader, and one of the things I tend to talk about in my keynotes is the eye opener for me. And when I think I started to shift my leadership style was when I had a realization that you might not want to work for me for the rest of your life. When I started my leadership journey, I didn't build a lot of relationship capital with my team. It was KPIs, it was OKRs, it was TPS reports, it was quotas, it was all of those things. And I didn't get involved. I didn't want to be your friend. We worked together. It was either working or it wasn't working. And if it wasn't working, I hated the idea of firing you, but I would work you out of the system. I would have sleepless nights over it. But I had gotten to a point where I was ready to terminate someone a number of years ago. I was still very driven by metrics and numbers and data. And our Susan, our chief HR officer, said, "Hey, do you mind before we part ways. I mean, we are on the cusp of getting on a Teams call to fire this guy. You mind if I just call him on the side to just check in? And he opened up, and he opened up in a way to share that he personally was suffering a really great loss. And the last couple of months, he got to a breaking point, and I had not taken the time to build relationship capital at all. It was all business all the time. Hit your number. I would send texts at 9 o'clock at night and 4 o'clock in the morning. When I was thinking about it, I would send you that note. And when I realized that he and I were oddly on the same journey, and I hadn't shared that with my boss, his same suffering was my same suffering. I came to the realization that this was a people first business, and building relationship capital with the people around you is far more important than them hitting their quota, because we're all going through something. Forget work for a minute. We're all going through divorce, diagnosis, depression, bankruptcy, loss, whatever. On the inverse of that, other people are going through marriage and first time home buying and pregnancies and deliveries. And if we as leaders don't take the time to get to know the people for people, then we're missing the opportunity. And I saw my career and the people that worked with me for me find far greater success when I realized that people over profits was actually a thesis worth investing in. And that if you have a loss, we talked about Big Leaf. I lost my sister in law when I worked at Big Leaf. 31 years old, I got a phone call at 3 a.m. that she had passed away. One of the founders, Jeff, called and said, take all the time you need. Big Leaf had served me so well that I knew there was sincerity to take all the time that you need. I was gone for weeks, but that's what I needed to support my wife. And there's Gallup polls, there's all sorts of data out there that suggests when you care well for your people, they're going to work harder. They're more invested in the business. They're more likely to put the hours in. They're going to produce greater results. They're going to stay longer in terms of tenure, and they're more likely to recommend you as a place to work. So for those of you that think the last like minute and a half of me is nonsense, there's actually data around doing the right thing actually pays off. The other thing that I think is really a powerful transition for me professionally was that realization that not everybody always wants to work with me or for me or in the business. If if you're working for me as a sales rep and your ultimate goal is to be a greeter at Walmart, sounds crazy. I should know what your ultimate goals and objectives are, but if that's your goal, my job while you're working for me and with me is to make you the best salesperson on the planet, and make sure that when you leave to go be a greeter at Walmart, that you are the best frickin' greeter at Walmart than they've ever seen, because I owe that to you. Your professional journey should be important to me, even if that means you don't work with me or for me a year from now.
Wow, what a great way to end this conversation. I learned an incredible amount. I'd love to have you back, specifically to double click on the leadership dimension. Eric, thank you. Thank you for being here.
I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you so much for having me.